few weeks ago, coming out of the events that we saw happening in Maui, if you remember, we made a video talking about trauma response because that's an area that is often overlooked in the church. That's something that as a church, I think we struggle to do really well. And so we discussed what not to do. Well, as luck would have it, 2 weeks after I made that video, I was sent to Acton, Montana to act as the chaplain for Racers for Christ. We had an amazing 4-day race weekend, prayed with a number of drivers, did chapel service, made and built relationships. But that's not the only reason why we're there. One of the big reasons why we are there is to respond in case there is an on-track incident or in case there's something going on in the life of one of the racers or race fans or track workers. Well, you know what? Unfortunately, this weekend or that weekend, we had a motorcycle racer come off his bike at the finish line at close to 180 miles an hour. He tumbled, he rolled. He ended up having to be airlifted to the local hospital. Good news, he's gonna make a full recovery. He's actually now back in this area. So praise the Lord for that. But it opened up an opportunity for me to kind of share what this kind of looks like, because as I was going to the top end to help with the situation, one of our other chaplains who was there with me went to the top end. And I ended up meeting and working with a track worker there who was standing there right at the guardrail where this happened. And I rolled up on this guy who's trying to do his job and keep as many people from the accident scene as possible. But as I rolled up, this gentleman is having a hard time dealing with what was going on. He was having a distinct trauma response because, well, he thought he just watched a man die. That is a pretty traumatic experience. When you watch someone come rolling by you on the ground after they were just on a motorcycle, that is traumatic to see. And so I spent the better part of an hour there and then later on through the rest of the weekend working with this gentleman. Why? Why would I do that? Well, because even though he was not part of the incident, he was part of the incident. He had secondary exposure. He watched this happen. It was traumatic. We're meant to be in relationship with one another. So when we see someone go through something, it can be really traumatic. And I had it brought up that, this gentleman was a former law enforcement. And something that we forget is that many times law enforcement, fire department, those that help and respond are coming to the aftermath of something, where this gentleman watched this actually happen. And to see something actually happen instead of just respond is another layer of potential trauma. So what I saw in the situation was an individual who was struggling to be able to think and process properly. See, what happens when we deal with trauma or in a traumatic experience, we get what you all, I'm sure, have heard is the fight or flight experience, where you need to get back. You feel like, okay, things have changed. I need to get to safety because I don't feel safe. Whether we watched something, saw something, experienced something, or we're actually the one that was having the trauma done to them. Our brain is designed to function to need to get back to a state of homeostasis, get back to a state of rest. And with trauma, it prevents us, if we don't deal with it and deal with that stimulus, our brain tries to find other ways to deal with it. This is why we have so many people that don't deal with their trauma that end up with other issues, anxiety issues, depression, self-harm, you could name a number of mental disorders that would come from not dealing with trauma. This is where, whether you are a pastor, a counselor, or a lay helper within the church, helping somebody work through those their their trauma response is necessary. So how do we do this? Well, you need to allow them to process through. Allow the individual to talk through it and encourage them. And as you encourage them, encourage right thinking. Because there are many times where we're faced with trauma where we will try to, as we're trying to process through it, we try to come up with why did it happen? How did it happen? We need answers because we're programmed to feel like if we have answers, we can put this to rest and we can get better. Well, okay, if you have the answers, that's great, but the reality is most situations you're not going to have the answers. Most of the time, your answers are going to be attempts to find the truth, but are just going to end up being lies or manipulations of the mind. So, in a case of someone who has gone through trauma, you need to help them understand what is really going on. Calm them down, because they're incapable of having rational thought at the time. Bring them down, calm them down, maybe even get them to sit down. Get them to talk. Be calm, be cool, be collected with them, and allow them to process. And when they try to take and put it on themselves, talk them out of that. No, that wasn't the case. Okay? Bring calm, counteract those false beliefs, those false thoughts that might feel like putting the onus on themselves or seeing things that they didn't see. One of the things that is really common is catastrophizing what we see. I'm guilty of this. Abby will tell you this. When I deal with stuff, a lot of times I go to the worst case scenario immediately. There's been studies that have shown that this is because if we can go to the worst place and it's not that bad, then it's easier to work back. That may be the case, that may not be the case. There's no real agreement on that. Either way, it leads to a thought process that isn't true. So when we're able to talk with someone and counteract those false beliefs, it helps get back to a state of homeostasis. Because let's remember, we're trying to go from this trauma, this on high alert, this fight or flight, this, okay, we need to do something, to a normal state of rest. We're trying to help them get back to that rest, because when they're all the way up here, what ends up happening is all the hormones, all those things are adrenaline and everything's running through their brain, changing their brain chemistry, changing their body chemistry. They're unable to really think clearly because all they're thinking about is survival. With trauma, the trauma response is all about survival and overcoming. So as a helper, we need to be able to talk them down, bring them back to calm, and help them reinstate proper thought processes, rational thought processes. So this is where when you respond to trauma, you have to understand that the person that you're meeting with, that you're talking with, isn't in a rational place at that time. You need to be the rational one to kind of talk them through, calm them, help them to take care of even the most simple things. To someone going through trauma is beyond their scope. Like telling them, you need to sit down, drink some water, take a breath. Let's go for a little walk. Just little things that seem so simple when you're in your right mind aren't always the most simple. And in doing so, you help restore the ability to think clearly, to think rationally, to bring themselves down, to help self-regulate. Because the problem is, if we don't help people self-regulate, they can't help themselves. And our goal is not to be there to care for them and continue to care for them, because there comes a time where they have to go back to being normal. So as a trauma responder, we need to practice presence. We need to practice calm and confidence. And we need to help bring down, not escalate things, not allow our own issues to escalate the issue, but allow our calmness and our objectivity to bring them down. So in doing so, I saw in just practicing presence, talking with this individual, working through them, and allowing them to then go on and have the trial and error. Allowing them to go in and have time to go try and get back to normal operating. You know, that in this case, this individual sat there, talked with him, brought him down, calmed him down to a point where he felt like he was able to go back and restore, back to a portion of what his normal operation was. Allowed him to do that, came and checked in with him half hour later. Everything's still good? Okay. Hour later, you still good? Yep. Let him know that I care. Let him know that I was there. Let him know that if anything came up, I was here to help him. And this continued through the weekend. Met with him the next day. Hey, how'd last night go? Were you able to sleep? Because many times people aren't able to sleep. They start, we start to try to rest, to go to sleep. And all those intrusive thoughts come back. And we have to deal with it through the night. So many times the next day, you have to readdress it. You have to come back. You have to help them process through it again. And then let them go and walk. And start figuring things out on their own. And then if they need it, come back. It's this trial and error, give and take, that will help those that have been traumatized to find healing. So as you go out and you face trauma in your life, you face others and try to help others who are going through trauma, remember to stay calm. Remember to help them. We're trying to help them get back to a state of homeostasis. Allow them the ability to think, to breathe, and help them just calm down. Those of you who are parents, kind of like when your child has thrown a fit or that, something just isn't going right, and you talk calmly and kindly to them and bring them down. This is what we're trying to do. So remember, with trauma, we're trying to get them back to homeostasis. We're trying to bring calm. We're trying to counteract those irrational thoughts and restore rational thinking. In doing so, we'll help them gain resiliency and strength moving forward to overcome the challenges that they have ahead of them as they continue to process through the trauma they've experienced. Because trauma just doesn't go away because we've discussed it or addressed it once. It's a slow process. But the more that we can give those who have gone through trauma the tools necessary, the better they're going to be in the future, overcoming this trauma and trauma in the future. So remember this as you try to help others going off this week and in the future. Thank you for watching. God bless.